Okay, so it's time for us to go ahead and get back into our coverage over the Onslaught crossover as we dive into the second, really the last two chapters for phase two. And then we get into the whole change of the Marvel universe for one particular year, better known as Heroes Reborn. But getting into these two chapters, we're going to start off with X-Men issue number 56. Now, this issue is all about Magneto and Rogue, it says as well, but really more of Magneto. And the reason why I say more Magneto than Rogue is because when it comes to Magneto, at this point in time, he was going with a name known as Joseph. And the reason why he was using that name is because he woke up one day and did not remember anything from his past at all. And so for him, he's hearing all these things he did in the past being Magneto, this evil person, an enemy of the X-Men, and done some horrible things across the world, but also he's part of the reason why we have Onslaught here at the moment. And so for Magneto, hearing all these bad things that he has done over the years is just eating away at him. But here's the thing, because you do have him and Rogue right now trying to work together. You have Rogue trying to get survivors away from the Sentinels, while you have Magneto trying his best to fight against this group of Sentinels. Here's the problem though, because for Magneto, or Joseph here, this is his first time, because this whole entire crossover has been him fighting against Sentinels. But for Magneto, he's beginning to learn that these robots were made to fight against mutants. And meaning that these robots know how to adapt. They know how to fight against low-level mutants and high-level mutants like Magneto. And so at first, he is so confident that he'll be able to take down these robots, but he's learning very quickly here that that's not going to be the case, that he is going to have a hard time. And so you do have these Sentinels being able to just beat down on Magneto. You have Rogue try to help out as well, but she also gets beat down as well. It gets to the point where we're kind of left to believe that they're officially dead. But then at the very last second, you then have Doctor Doom arrive. Now, when Doctor Doom arrives, it's freaking amazing. He's kind of like, I am here. I'm the best villain. I'm better than you, Magneto. I'm better than all these bad guys in New York City. But for Magneto, he's kind of surprised to see Doctor Doom here because he knows Doctor Doom is a bad guy. But you then have Steve Rogers appear. And for Steve, he's saying like, listen, when it comes to something like this, sometimes the most craziest alliance happens when it comes to an event like this. And so Doom being here may seem wild, but look around. It's complete chaos across the whole entire city. But it's also Steve saying like, knowing Doctor Doom, he wants to make sure the world is still around so that he'll then be able to rule over this world. But either way, you have Magneto expressing once again that he's very upset about the fact that he's somewhat responsible for the creation of Onslaught. But it's Steve saying like, listen, I know your past. I knew who you were before this. But seeing you now, the way you acting, the way you're trying to make sure that nobody dies under your watch is a great thing. But here's the thing though. When it comes to you trying to, confess your sins, don't come to me. Go to somebody else. Somebody else you need to talk to about your past mistakes. I'm not that person for you. Now, we're also getting reminded that when it came to Nate Gray, by this point in the crossover, he had been officially taken away by Onslaught. Here comes the big thing, because now we know why he took Nate Gray for. He wants to go into Nate Gray's mind to learn more about the Age of Apocalypse reality, because in that reality where Nate Gray is from, mutants were first class, humans were second class. And so for Onslaught, he wants to learn what happened in Nate Gray's reality that led to that point so that the mutant race in this reality can be first class and humans can be second class. But this leads into a conversation between Magneto and also Charles Xavier. And man, let me tell you, this conversation is pretty important for me. Here's the reason why, because it's Magneto already admitting like He's at fault for the creation of Onslaught, only partially though. But it's also Charles Xavier saying it's also his fault in the creation of Onslaught as well. Because for Charles Xavier, it was him who shut down the mind of Magneto. And they kind of like, well, Charles had no choice there because Wolverine in the adamantium scene. But it's Charles saying that I thought because I had the power, I had the right to make that move. But in reality, I had no right to make that move. I made a mistake then. And so now it's Charles kind of admitting that if he did not do that, if he didn't let his darker side kind of come out and mix with Magneto's darker side, then most likely Onslaught would not be here right now. That matter of fact, New York would be safe at the moment. But either way, you do have Magneto leave to join the rest of the heroes for the final attack. Charles does not go. Well, Charles says he has his own part in the final attack against Onslaught here. But getting back over to Onslaught and also, well, Nate Gray, is Onslaught realizing what happened in Nate Gray's reality. Is him realizing that in that reality, even though mutants were first class, humans were second class, all of that fell apart thanks to the X-Men, thanks to a few other characters besides the X-Men as well. And so for Onslaught, he's saying like, you threw all of that away? Like, you guys had the chance to be first class for who knows how long, and you threw it all away? And so now for Onslaught, this changes his entire plan. But you do have the heroes meeting up with one another, except while you have the heroes getting ready for the final attack, they have their psionic armor ready to go, you have Jean Grey realize Charles left. Charles took a vehicle or aircraft to go somewhere else. The question is now where? And we kind of find out what Charles did. You see, for Charles, he went over to where Onslaught was at. It's Charles saying like, listen, I know there has to be a small part of me still inside of you. And with that small part of me still inside of you, you will realize that killing off the human race is not going to make anything better for the mutant race at all. Now, you have Onslaught agree at first like, yeah, Charles, you know what? You're right. But you see, I changed my plan. I changed my ways. You see, now I'm not just going to go after humans. I'm now going to go after mutants as well. Nobody is going to survive. Not humans nor mutants. And this leads into the epilogue of this event. And guys, with that being said, wait, I'm sorry. I forgot. We still got one more chapter to cover. We got to cover X-Men Unlimited issue number 12. The actual final chapter to this crossover. You see, this entire issue is really more about the fact that we're trying to get Juggernaut back to the way he was before the whole idea of Onslaught. And let me explain, because when it came to us covering Age of Apocalypse, as soon as we had finished that storyline right there and began our way up to Onslaught, you had Onslaught being able to send Juggernaut flying across the entire country. And so when he had crashed in front of our heroes, it was kind of like, who had the power to send Cain Marco flying across the country? He said it was Onslaught. Ever since then, it was kind of like, man, the Juggernaut now seems a tad bit weak, like he's not his usual self. This storyline, its main goal is to get back to where we were when it came to his character. That is why as you get into the opening pages of the storyline, you're picking up with, well, Doctor Strange. Now, this is Doctor Strange arriving at the school of Charles Xavier. This part right here is really going to be him learning about Onslaught and what's happening back in New York, because when he arrives at the school of Charles Xavier, he realized the X-Men nor Xavier are there at the moment. But he has some kind of weird sense that there's something bad going on when it comes to magic. And so that is when he looks at the desk of Charles Xavier. What he sees is the Crimson Gem of Sidorak just sitting there like a paperweight. But also he realized, who is trapped inside the gym, and that would be Cain Marko. Now, for Doctor Strange, you kind of realize for that to happen, somebody or something really powerful had to find a way to separate the gem from Cain Marko, but to also lock him inside of it. And so you have Strange being able to use his magic to figure out what exactly went down at the very beginning of this event. The whole idea of Onslaught being able to remove the gem from Cain Marko, but putting him inside of it. Now, for Doctor Strange, he tells us this is really a problem because with Cain Marko no longer in control of the gem, no longer holding on to it, there's a possibility that Sidorak will be able to come back to Earth. And so for Doctor Strange, he's right now trying his best to find a way to make sure that does not happen. But before you have Doctor Strange being able to do anything at all, that is when you have Gomor the Ancient appear. Now, when it comes to Gomor, we have met him in an earlier storyline dealing with the Crimson Dawn. The whole idea of using the Crimson Dawn to save the life of Psylocke. Now, when it comes to Gomor, he kind of realized also what's going on when it comes to the Crimson Gem. And so his main goal is to go inside there, help Cain Marko to bring Cain Marko back into, well, the Earth reality. But here's the thing. He wants to go by himself. Now, he also kind of hints at the idea of the reason why, because for Doctor Strange, Wolverine, and Archangel, they are the reason why Psylocke now has the Crimson Dawn. But also, they had crossed the Guardian of the Crimson Dawn, better known as Tar. Now, Tar will play a somewhat important role at the very end of this chapter. But either way, you do have Gomor go inside the actual gem. Now, once you do go inside the gem, the Crimson Gem of Sidorak, we kind of see Cain Marko going through this nightmare. Now, here's the thing about this nightmare, because it's him right now being unable to move. And here's the reason why. Because in this nightmare, his life went differently. And let me explain. You see, for Cain, he had found the Crimson Gem on accident. But in this nightmare, he's laying in the bed, unable to move his arms and legs. But you do have Charles Xavier arrive. Now, once Charles arrives, he informs us and also Cain Marko why he can't move in this nightmare. It's the nightmare saying like, yeah, you were part of the army. You were fighting in a war, except you went AWOL. And the thing was, you found this cave that held the Crimson Gem. The problem was it caved in. Bunch of rocks fell on you and crushed your body. And so unfortunately for you, you can't move. You can't walk. And so in this nightmare, he's just stuck. And it's Charles having to take care of him. And so as the nightmare continues on, you have Charles Xavier just push Juggernaut around in the wheelchair. And we kind of find out he's not only taking care of Cain in this nightmare, he's also taking care of some characters like Jean Grey, Cyclops, Iceman, Beast, and Wolverine. But in this nightmare, they're not mutants. They're not freaks. Instead, they're kids who have physical disabilities or psychological disabilities as well. And so it's Charles right now trying to be their caretaker. Now, as the nightmare continues on, that is when you have Gomor appear. Now, once you do have Gomor appear, for Gomor, he knows what's going on with this nightmare. He knows who's controlling the nightmare. And that would be a character known as Spite. Now, when it comes to Spite, she is the sister to another character better known as Despair. Now, Despair is a character we have seen a few times in our coverage over the X-Men, but for Gomor, he knows that when it comes to Spite, she's working with Sidorak. And so she does leave. But she said, hey, listen, my master is not going to give up that easily. And the thing is for Gomor, he believes he can still take on Sidorak. But she says, you got lucky last time when it came facing him back on Earth. But she does leave. Now, for Gomor, his next goal is to help Cain Marko get the heck out of here. The problem is that for Cain Marko, he has to trust Gomor to help him get out of here. Now, inside the gym, Cain Marko is powerless. He can't do really anything at all to Gomor. But either way, you kind of have Cain agree to go with Gomor as long as Gomor can help him to get the heck out of there. But while you have the two characters walking around the gym, they walk into the school of Charles Xavier, Xavier's mansion. Now, here's the thing, because as they walk inside, we kind of get the chance to relive the origin of Cain Marko, because we do learn here that for Cain Marko, growing up, he hated his father, but he also hated Charles Xavier. And let me explain why. You see, for Cain Marko, his father married Xavier's mother. But on top of that, when it came to Cain Marko's father, he had the ability to save Xavier's father. He chose not to. Xavier's father died and allowed Cain Marko's father to marry Xavier's mother. With all that being said, for a good while there, for Cain's father, his main focus was his experiments, but also Charles Xavier. He also discovered that Charles was special, of course, talking about the idea of his mutant ability. But for Cain, he kind of realized that his father's focus was always on Xavier and his experiments. And so it got to the point where there was a small explosion and of course a fire broke out. For Cain Marko's father, he grabbed Charles first before grabbing Cain. Now Cain right here believes if his father was able to grab him first and not Xavier at all, then most likely Cain Marko's father would still be alive. But because he tried his best to save both boys, unfortunately, he died. And so ever since then, for Cain Marko, he blamed Xavier for the death of his father. So you have Gomor tell Cain Marko, like, your hatred for your brother is consuming you. Once it does, there'll be nothing left of you at all. But it's also Gomor saying, like, your anger, your fear is blocking you from seeing the true goal that Sidorak had left out for you. Here's the thing, you have to let go of your past. Once you were able to do that, you then have the ability to get the heck out of here. And so once you have Cain kind of say, you know what, fine, I will let go of my past, a doorway begins to open up. But that is when you have Spike reappear. Now, when she does reappear, her main goal right now is supposedly help Cain Marko realize that Gomor is trying to trick him. She's saying, like, listen, he's right now guiding you in a different direction where you're going to end up powerless. And that's what he wants for you. But if you follow me, I can unlock the true power that has been kept away from you. And of course, for Cain Marko, he wants that power. And so, of course, he goes with her. And so you have Spike kind of show this illusion where it's the X-Men bowing down to Cain Marko. It's Charles Xavier defeated in front of Cain Marko. Everything he could possibly want. But it's Gomor saying, like, but that's the problem right there. Because here's the thing. Once you do get rid of your enemies, then it's your friends. Then it's your lovers. And then you get to the point where you're the only person left in the world that's standing over piles of dead bodies because you went on an endless rampage. Now for Spike, she does shut Gomor up. And we kind of learn a tad bit more about his character here. And so this kind of leads into Spike kind of giving us the origin of Gomor here. What she says is that a century ago, you had Sidorak being able to arrive on Earth. And the reason why, because you had these monks try to harness the power of Sidorak for themselves. Unfortunately, it backfired for them and got them killed. But luckily for the Earth, you had two monks being able to stop Sidorak. One being Gomor and the other one being Tar. Tar, who's right now guarding the Crimson Dawn. The two monks were able to work together to lock Sidorak inside the gym. Here comes the big problem though. Neither monk had trusted one another to guard the gym, so they buried it and went their separate ways. The problem was that over time, you had earthquakes happen left and right. And of course, it allowed Cain Marko to find the gem. Now, what Spike is saying is that if Cain Marko had left the gem like Gomor wanted, then Gomor be able to possess the power of Sidorak for himself. But now with Cain Marko staying, Cain will now have the ability to hold on to that power for himself. Now, Gomor tried to say it's lies, but you have Spike say, close your mouth. Nope, you cannot speak anymore. And she takes Cain away. And so you have Spike take Cain over to this huge statue. Now, we learn here, this is not a statue actually. This is Sidorak himself. This is Sidorak basically saying like, oh, she played you, Cain. Like, what I'm going to do right now is make you my vessel to allow me to head over to Earth to continue to cause havoc across the entire planet. And so for Cain Marko, he's now realizing that he got played by Spite. We also learn here that for Spite, she was locked away in his gym by her brother Despair. But either way, Sidorak promised her to take her with him back over to Earth. Now, you do have two characters being able to come in the very last second to save the day. You see, you have Tar appear and also Gomorrah. Now, when the two characters do appear, they again work together to kind of restore the power that Cain Marko lost. Of course, the power of the Juggernaut. And so with that power now being restored, it allowed Cain Marko the ability to be able to defeat Sidorak. And so with him doing that, you didn't have Cain Marko being able to lead this dimension and head over to, well, back to Earth. And of course for Tar and also Gomorrah, they're stuck inside the gem still. And so the book does kind of end on the note where you basically have Cain Marko kind of being able to go back to Earth. He's now more powerful than he was before he left the Earth. Now, when it comes to Doctor Strange, he basically tells us this is a problem because sooner or later, even though Cain Marko is stronger, by the time he realized the true purpose of the curse that he has now gained from Sidorak, it will be too late. That everything around him is going to be basically destroyed. But this is where we're going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.